Hello and welcome to A News. My name is Atim Tongana, coming to you live from Baku in Azerbaijan. Here are the headlines. Trump demands Iran pay compensation for damages and debts it has caused over the years. The death toll following a 7.4 magnitude earthquake in Colombia has risen to 164 as world leaders pledge assistance. And Azerbaijan, Armenia and the US reaffirm commitment to lasting peace 1 year after historic declaration. All right, we begin with this. US President Donald Trump has issued a new set of demands to Iran, calling on Tehran to pay compensation for people killed in wars, attacks and protests. The remarks have raised fresh questions over efforts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
US President Donald Trump has stepped up his rhetoric on Iran, saying Tehran should pay compensation for people killed in wars, attacks and protests caused over the past 50 years. Speaking at the White House on Monday, Trump said the claim would cover the deaths of both civilian protesters and US troops in the region.
They asked for reparations, you might say, or they asked for money for the damage that we've done. I said, that's a good idea. Well, we're going to ask for money for the damage they've done over a 50-year period. Whether you go SS Cole or whether you go all of the people that were so badly hurt, so badly wounded or killed, many thousands of people, and maybe damages for the 52,000 protesters over the last 4 months that were killed in Iran.
Meanwhile, human rights groups have reported a much lower death toll of the protesters who died during demonstrations this year. His comments follow Iran's demands for compensation and an end to sanctions. Tehran has said the US must lift sanctions and end military threats before the Strait of Hormuz can reopen. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Esmail Baghaei said talks with Oman were continuing and that progress had been made on new shipping lanes. He said some technical issues were still unresolved. Washington and Tehran agreed to a ceasefire in June, but the US reimposed a blockade on Iranian shipping in July. Tehran says that move violated the agreement. Analysts say Trump's new demands could make negotiations over the Strait of Hormuz even more difficult. After his remarks, oil prices closed 5% higher.
Staying on the US-Iran conflict, for more on the story, I'm joined by a geopolitical analyst in Pakistan, Dr. Irfan Raja. Hello and welcome to A News.
Thank you for having me into your program.
So why is Iran sending both its foreign minister and parliament speaker to Islamabad at this particular stage of the crisis?
Well, this is a very significant move, and these are the two significant developments involving Iran, Pakistan, and Oman. On one hand, the Iranians are negotiating, trying to find the solution mechanism for the Strait of Hormuz, and so each side, Tehran says that two sides have reached an understanding on geographical coordinates of a proposed shipping route, while the technical details of joint statement are still being worked out. But this is very significant, and at this moment when the both sides are also, Pakistan, if you look at Pakistan, they are looking for their very strong role as a mediator, and this mediation goes on. You just mentioned in your intro that the President Trump have asked Iran to pay the compensation. I think he has lost his credibility as a president, and by taking U-turns, saying one thing in the morning and changing his stance in the evening. So all eyes on Middle East, because Iran has lost, America has completely lost this war, and now the dynamics of Middle East are changing fast. That's why I think it's very, very important, and also this sends a message in Pakistan and particularly those in the West and their allies through creating a narrative in media that this
Yeah.
is some Sunni NATO style alliance. So this message confirms that both the politicians and the army on the same page.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the role of Pakistan. I want us to look deeper into it now. Is Iran looking to Pakistan then to break the deadlock with Washington or to strengthen its negotiation position?
Yes, you have put it very rightly, and I think since in the start of the war, I have been saying, and the world top scholars and critics have been saying that there is always a backdrop, on there is always negotiations taking place, back channels, and the diplomacy also works. So, having said this, the Pakistanis are very much serious to take it further. And I think with all what is going on at the moment, considering all these developments, I think the Americans are looking for face saving, and it is high time for like all the major powers involved in this. The Pakistanis are not alone; they are obviously supported, joined by the Chinese and Russians since from the start. Saudis and Turkey on Qatar are all on the same page. Everyone wants peace because this war is affecting all of us, not only in the West Asia, South Asia, but also in Europe. So I think there's a great chance once again the Pakistanis, as the mediators, they have strengthened their position and they have established credibility, and everybody is looking forward to it to have peace in this region.
Could then Pakistan's role help to revive the Iran-US framework that collapsed last month?
Yes, there is a chance because, as I mentioned, the great powers like including Russia and China are supporting this, and this is favoring in all, not only the Middle East regional powers, but beyond Middle East, because because of this war, the world is paying the heavy price. The petrol prices are going up, the cost of living is going up. As you see in the UK, the Prime Minister lost his seat just because the ruling party, because of the cost of living crisis going up, and the cost of living crisis and ordinary people are paying the price. This pattern is everywhere as we are heading towards election in Israel and in America. So I think these countries are also heavily under pressure, not from abroad but from inside their public. So I think there's a chance for peace. Yes.
Yeah. So now, does Iran's separate engagement with Oman on the Strait of Hormuz signal a shift in how Tehran is approaching this crisis?
To an extent, yes, because you see, as I mentioned earlier, and you talked in your intro as well, President Trump saying one thing and then taking U-turn. So there's a trust factor. He has lost his credibility. So as the what happened to the memorandum of understanding MOU signed by the Americans, and then they changed. I mean, to an extent, both sides, but mostly the Americans. So there is an always alternative, and that's very important in the international politics because Iranians, not all alone themselves, but other countries also looking for alternatives. I think the Iranians are doing the same the approach, uh, trying to find an alternative this, and they are engaging with their neighbors Omanis to Cable Hormuz arrangement that could help reduce disruption to the one of the world most important oil and shipping choke points.
With Iran still demanding to end the U.S. naval blockade, what is a tangible path then to reopening the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, that's all depends on the seriousness coming from America because obviously, as I mentioned, they have lost the war. The Americans have lost the war, and everyone, including their top generals and analysts inside America, they are saying it. So I think it's face saving, and they are looking forward for some kind of diplomatic settlement. So all channels are working, and we are just. I mean, I'm pretty much hopeful that there is soon we find a solution. We see the solution to
Yeah.
a peaceful way.
We've heard progress in the talks. So if then the talks with Oman are strictly bilateral, how significant can they be without an agreement between Iran and the US on broader political differences that they still have?
I think we have to wait and see. I couldn't predict, the how seriousness is. It all depends on both sides how serious they are in negotiations, particularly the Americans. By if they are really serious, and as I said, I repeat it again, they have lost a war, so they need face saving, and for that, the only solution is through diplomatic means, and that is to compensate, not asking Iranians to compensate. And that's, you mentioned in the intro that the President Trump was saying 52,000 lives. That's a lie, actually. And I think both sides are demanding some sort of compensation. So Americans have to, in the end, they have to go according to the Iranians, demands. They have to compensate. They have to compromise. There are compromises on both sides. So we look forward to it.
We indeed look forward to it. Dr. Raja, thank you so much for your insights on A News.
Thank you. You're welcome.
All right, Mohsen Rezai was appointed Supreme Leader, Mojtaba Khamenei's representative to Iran's Supreme National Council Security on Sunday before being named Secretary of the powerful security body. But who is this man and what is his background? Here's what we know.
Mohsen Rezai, a former commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, has been appointed to head the country's top security body, a key institution in Iran's security and foreign policy. The 71-year-old replaces Mohammad Bagher Zolgadar, who has been appointed political advisor to Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei. Rezai is a more outspoken public figure than his predecessor. The position was previously held by Ali Larijani, who was killed in a US-Israeli strike in March. Rezai led the IRGC from 1981 to 1997, including for much of the Iran-Iraq War, known in Iran as the Sacred Defense. He later became a prominent figure in Iran's political and security establishment, serving for more than 2 decades as Secretary of the Expediency Discernment Council, a body which helps resolve disputes between Parliament and the Guardian Council. He also served as Vice President for Economic Affairs from 2021 to 2023, under the hardline President Ibrahim Raisi. Rezai holds a doctorate in economics from the University of Tehran, but much of his career has been spent in Iran's security and political institutions. The Guardian Council, meanwhile, vets candidates for key elected positions and reviews legislation to ensure it complies with Iran's constitution and Islamic law. Rezai has also repeatedly stressed the strategic importance of Iran maintaining control over the Strait of Hormuz, a vital global energy route through which around 1/5 of the world's oil and gas supplies pass. His appointment puts a veteran of Iran's Revolutionary Guard and political establishment at the centre of the country's security decision-making at a time when regional tensions remain high.
Meanwhile, in Palestine, Israeli forces have allegedly destroyed water pipelines in the West Bank, according to Palestinian sources. That's according to local activists who say artesian wells have been filled, causing losses to farmers. They say it's the latest in a series of Israeli operations in the area. Local sources also said 2 Palestinian brothers were detained in the northern Jordan Valley. Near Ramallah, Palestinian officials said agricultural land was also set on fire. Israeli officials have previously raised concerns over illegal drilling and unauthorized connections to the water network in the West Bank. A Syrian court sentenced ousted leader Bashar al-Assad to death on Tuesday after a trial in absentia, convicting him of crimes including killings, torture, and arbitrary arrest during the country's nearly 14-year war. Assad's cousin Atef Najib, a former head of political security in southern Syrian province, was also sentenced to death. It was the first conviction against Assad, who was ousted in a rebel offensive in December in 2024 that ended decades of his family's rule over Syria and a brutal war that killed hundreds of thousands of Syrians. Assad fled Damascus as rebel fighters approached nearly 2 years ago and is now in Moscow. Ukraine says that Russian attacks killed 6 people and wounded 20 in its southern city early on Tuesday, while strikes also hit Kiev, triggering fires in the capital, where Kiev officials said warehouses in a central district caught fire. Over in southeastern and the south-central Ukraine, local authorities reported that 6 people were killed and 16 wounded overnight. Meanwhile, a drone attack in Russia's Voronezh region killed 1 person and injured 2 others. Falling debris also sparked fires at Wildberries warehouse, according to the governor and the company. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia is preparing to deploy more North Korean troops and has received additional ballistic missiles from Pyongyang. Zelensky warns that growing military cooperation between the two countries could pose a wider threat beyond Ukraine.
They are now preparing to deploy an additional North Korean contingent on its territory. They have also received additional ballistic missiles from North Korea. Everyone around the world must understand what this means. This is not only about the lives of people in Ukraine and not only about the threats we face. North Korea's ballistic missiles and other weapons are being improved through its collaboration with Russia. The more North Korean strikes there are here in Ukraine, in Europe, the more their missiles and soldiers are used, the more they correct their shortcomings and blind spots, the greater the danger will later be for Japan, the Republic of Korea, the Philippines, and other countries in the region. That is why, when we speak about the need for joint action, for coordination and mutual support, when we speak about the need to help us strengthen our air defense, we are also in fact speaking about taking away North Korea's appetite and any interest in coming here, to our land and into our skies, with its weapons in order to learn how to wage war. Everyone across the globe who respects human life must stand together in taking action to protect people.
Kyrgyzstan has suggested hosting warehouses and logistic facilities for Russian e-commerce giant Wildberries. The initiative is aimed at reducing supply chain risks and comes as the two countries seek to increase bilateral trade turnover to $5 billion. A News correspondent Civil Rajapova reports from Tashkent.
Kyrgyzstan's Chamber of Commerce and Industry President Timur Sariyev has proposed that Wildberries move part of its warehouses and logistics operations to Kyrgyzstan. The proposal was made during a meeting of the Kyrgyz-Russian Business Council, where officials and businesses discussed ways to increase bilateral trade. He said distributing warehouses across several locations could make the company's supply chain more resilient and reduce the risk of relying on a single location. The suggestion comes after a series of drone attacks on Wildberries logistics facilities in Russia. According to reports, at least 20 Wildberries sites have been targeted since the 18th of July. The reported economic damage from these attacks is estimated to be at least $2.2 billion. Wildberries says it's launched a voluntary support program for sellers whose goods were damaged or destroyed. Sariyev also highlighted other obstacles for Kyrgyz businesses, including differences in product documentation, border queues, and delays in sanitary inspections. The proposed logistics facilities could therefore help diversify Wildberries' distribution network while addressing some of the supply chain challenges affecting Kyrgyz manufacturers. The proposal comes as Kyrgyzstan and Russia work towards increasing bilateral trade to $5 billion. Sibir Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan A-News.
NATO's eastern flank is stepping up security around critical energy and infrastructure sites. The move is amid growing concerns over possible Russian provocations. Lithuania, Latvia and Poland have all increased protection around key facilities as officials warn of potential threats to the region's energy and electricity networks.
Security protection has been strengthened at Lithuania's critical infrastructure. The country's military intelligence reportedly obtained information that Russia was considering attacks in the Baltic region using captured Ukrainian drones. Since the 18th of June, Lithuania's military personnel have been helping protect the country's LNG terminal, power facilities, and an electricity link with Poland. Defence Minister Robertas Kaunas says he's extended the support of 30 personnel through to the 19th of August. Over in Latvia, extra security has been put in place around vital infrastructure, including a dam on the Daugava River near Riga and the Inčukalns underground natural gas storage facility. That's according to Prime Minister Andris Kulbergs in an interview with Reuters. In Poland, energy company Orlen is examining alternative gas import routes in case its usual supplies or infrastructure are threatened. Currently, it imports about 80% of Poland's gas through the Świnoujście LNG terminal and an undersea pipeline carrying Norwegian gas. Gaz System, which operates the infrastructure, is working under heightened alert conditions, according to a source familiar with the matter. Poland has also increased security around an electricity connection with Ukraine, which helps stabilize the country's war-damaged power grid. The moves reflect growing concern across NATO's eastern flank over potential attacks or sabotage targeting critical infrastructure.
All right, after the break, we'll take a look at the situation on the ground in Colombia after a 7.4 magnitude earthquake has killed at least 164 people. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Rescue operations have entered a second day after Colombia's most powerful earthquake in decades. At least 164 people have been killed, including 85 in Cali, 66 in Pereira, and 13 in Choco. Emergency teams say the death toll could rise as search continues.
Rescue workers, police, soldiers and volunteers dig through collapsed buildings and flattened homes in western Colombia. The magnitude 7.4 earthquake struck on Monday at a depth of 107 kilometres. It caused widespread destruction in the country's coffee-growing region. In an initial assessment, President Abelardo de la Espriella outlined the scale of the damage in Cali.
Nos encontramos en el puesto de mando unificado en la ciudad de Cali.
We have approximately 5,000 homes that have been damaged or collapsed, 35 fatalities, and approximately 700 injured. 3 hospitals have collapsed, and 18 others have been affected. 39 schools have been affected, and the airport has sustained damage and is operating on a limited basis. But what concerns us most, without a doubt, are the 188 people who are missing.
Several upper floors of one hospital collapsed, trapping some patients. Around 600 others were treated outside on a street covered with rubble. Emergency crews used excavators, picks and shovels to clear debris. At times, rescuers called for silence as they listened for signs of life.
Several parts of the city have been affected with structural damage. We have hospitals and schools that have been badly affected. The entire Cali Fire Department was deployed with all its capabilities. We are at different locations, trying to reach every last area and verify whether there are signs of life.
In Pereira, entire residential blocks were reduced to concrete and twisted steel. The earthquake also damaged the city's airport and brought down part of an historic cathedral tower in Manizales. Curfews were imposed in both cities following reports of looting. 1,000 additional security personnel were deployed to Cali. The disaster has drawn comparisons with the 1999 earthquake that devastated the same region and killed more than 1,000 people.
Beyond the rescue operation, attention is now turning to support from abroad. Governments and international organizations are offering emergency funding, specialist teams, and technical assistance.
International assistance is mobilizing for Colombia as emergency teams continue searching for survivors of Monday's powerful earthquake. Venezuela, still recovering from its own devastating earthquakes in June, when Colombia sent more than 60 rescue specialists, dogs, and equipment, was among the first countries to respond.
Hoy también amanecimos con la noticia.
This morning I gave the instruction to organise humanitarian aid to send to Colombia and the rescuers of the Simón Bolívar Brigade of Venezuela, who have also gone to help when natural tragedies have occurred in other countries. We have made our brigade members available to the government of Colombia for the rescue of the people who are under the rubble.
La Brigada Simón Bolívar de Venezuela.
The United States has committed $15.5 million for emergency shelter, food, protection, and damage assessments. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen expressed solidarity with Colombia and activated the EU's Copernicus satellite service. It will provide emergency maps to support damage assessments and help identify areas that may be difficult to reach. The United Nations said limited connectivity was complicating efforts to assess the impact in rural communities.
The government has initiated precautionary evacuations and is leading efforts to assess damage and casualties. Our thoughts go out to all who have suffered as a result of this earthquake, and we stand ready to help as needed. We will share updates as they become available.
Brazil, Ecuador, Mexico, Chile, and El Salvador have also offered assistance. Spain, France, and Italy have expressed support, although detailed commitments have not yet been announced. The Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean has pledged $500,000 to support the humanitarian response and reconstruction efforts.
A political gathering in Corica has been overshadowed by new threats from the island's former armed separatist group FLNC. French authorities have launched a terrorism investigation following a statement rejecting greater autonomy and warning newcomers to the island.
Corsican independence supporters gathered in the town of Corte from August 7th to 9th for the 44th edition of the International Day event. Organised by Nazione, a political movement campaigning for Corsican independence, the event brought together representatives of different peoples involved in independence and freedom movements. This year, the focus was largely on plans to give Corsica greater autonomy within France. Organisers also adopted a roadmap for Nazione's future political activities. But the event was overshadowed by a statement from the Corsican National Liberation Front, or FLNC, which has a history of armed and terrorist activity. In a secret press conference on August 6, the group rejected the proposed autonomy plan and warned French people who have moved to Corsica to stay at home. FLNC accused the French state, as well as nationalist politicians supporting autonomy, of betraying Corsica's interests. The group also described the arrival of around 5,000 French people on the island every year as a threat to Corsican identity and issued security threats against them. French authorities have responded by opening a preliminary investigation into suspected criminal association with a view to preparing terrorist acts.
The US government has reaffirmed its commitment to lasting peace between Azerbaijan and Armenia on the anniversary of the signing of a significant peace document. James Goodison has more from Washington, D.C.
Well, it's been 1 year to the day since President Trump hosted the President of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of Armenia to sign a joint declaration of peace. On that anniversary of the signing, the three countries have put out a statement today saying there's deep pride in what our countries have achieved together and great resolve to build upon the foundation that ended decades of conflict and put the South Caucasus on a path towards a more prosperous future. The statement also pointed towards a number of successes over the past year, stability on the border, steps to normalise relations as well. Also plans for the US to build infrastructure in both countries. Azerbaijan has nearly completed a highway and railroad to connect to a US-led project in Armenia. There's also a big push for trans-Caspian private investment in the South Caucasus and Central Asia as well. The statement also said there have been results on a host of other matters between the three countries, border infrastructure, security, AI, semiconductor innovation, and critical minerals as well. It noted that Azerbaijan lifted restrictions on transit to Armenia and that 60,000 tons of goods have now gone to and from Armenia via Azerbaijan, as well as 20,000 tons of oil products into Armenia as well. The two nations also joined President Trump's Board of Peace that has recently been focused on Israel and Gaza. There was a degree of breakthrough on that 10 days ago when Hamas agreed to disarm, although Israel have since called the plans unacceptable, and the result is in flux. The statement concluded that the three states remain committed to the full implementation of the agreement signed last year, and they look towards a bright and prosperous future in the region. James Goodison for A News in Washington, D.C.
Georgia is coming under growing scrutiny from Western regulators. The U.S. Treasury has sanctioned a Georgia-registered crypto platform, accusing it of moving millions of dollars for Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the latest in a string of sanctions cases tied to the country since July. Our Nini Nikolashvili has the story from Tbilisi.
The U.S. Treasury has blacklisted a Georgia-registered crypto platform, accusing it of funneling millions of dollars to Iran's Revolutionary Guard. The sanctions target SHPS Shellbit, a Georgia-based firm, and its affiliated cryptocurrency platform. Washington says the two formed part of an international money laundering network benefiting Iran and the IRGC. According to Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, roughly $3 million in IRGC-linked transactions passed through the platform, with more than $2 million sent onward to Nobitex, an already sanctioned Iranian exchange. OFAC says the network is run by two Iranian nationals based outside Iran who together have laundered tens of millions of dollars. It's the latest in a string of sanctions cases tied to Georgia since July. At least 3 companies now under scrutiny. Georgia's National Bank pushed back, saying SHPS Shellbit is a private company that never registered as a virtual asset service provider. Foreign Minister Makab Batarishvili acknowledged the difficulty of defending Georgia's interests without a seat at the table, a gap that itself opened after Tbilisi suspended EU accession talks last year. She said the government is working with the European Commission to protect Georgia's standing in the months ahead. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Joining me now for more on this regional story is the president of the Europe-Georgia Institute, George Melashvili. Thank you so much for joining me on A News.
Good evening. Thank you for the invitation.
So let's actually begin with what we know about the claims by the U.S.
Well, the Office of Foreign Assets Control announced its designation on the 7th of August. It is a part of a broader action against crypto exchanges and networks that, according to the United States, Tehran is using to launder money, evade sanctions, and eventually support IRGC. The element in Georgia is not that much connected to Georgia, first and foremost. The person behind it, Siavash Kayanpur, he's an Iranian-born who holds Dominican and Afghan citizenships and resides in the United Arab Emirates. He utilized the very liberal frameworks that Georgia has for business registration that has been a comparative advantage of Georgia for a very long time. And he registered a company within the country, this LTD Shellbit, while at the same time he also controls some companies in Poland and also in United Arab Emirates. According to the United States Office of Foreign Assets Control, eventually we're talking about at least $3 million US. However, also what has not been that much paid attention to is the fact that he was also in control of several online casinos. And these casinos were very likely used to also launder money for the IRGC. Also, what is interesting about this topic is that the designation did not come under money laundering charges. It came under Executive Order 13224, which is counter-terrorism activity. So in that case, it was material support to the IRGC and Nobitex. So it's not a technical money laundering citation, but a whole terrorism financing designation. Also, unfortunately for Georgia, it's not the first time that Georgian companies come under scrutiny. In May, so last 2 months ago, 3 companies registered in Georgia, Arvix, Rapira, and Ifori. They have also been designated, but not for their connections to Iran, but because of their connections to Russian Federation.
Mm-hmm. So then how significant is crypto becoming as a tool for sanctions evasion?
Well, crypto has always been a tool of sanction evasion, but right now it's not that much about crypto itself, because any tool or any cash can also be used for evasion. It's more about the activities of the Georgia's National Bank and also of the Georgian authorities. So far, the defense that they had was that these companies did not register under the frameworks created by the National Bank of Georgia. However, despite the fact that these companies have not registered, they have been able to implement activities in Georgia that were against the national interests of Georgia. So they have been slandering country's reputation when it comes to international business activities. So that's why, even though Georgia is largely compliant when it comes to the FATF compliances and also in general to the regulations and the sanctions that have been introduced both by the United States and also European Union, the question, how did the National Bank of Georgia, together with the Georgian government, allow such companies to operate for such a long time still remains. And eventually what we have seen were not the actions of the Georgian government, but the actions of the United States that eventually sanctioned these companies. So that's a very big question to the Georgian government. How did this happen?
Indeed. So then what does this case tell us about the vulnerabilities of Georgia's crypto sector to international sanctions and illicit finance?
Well, we definitely see that there is some reputational contagion. Georgia's comparative advantage has always been liberal business environment. Georgia is a small country. We do not have rich natural resources, so that's the only way how Georgia can remain competitive. However, every designation, and for example this one, it definitely increases the costs of de-risking for legitimate Georgian businesses and also for corresponding banking relationships. So that's why it is definitely a problem for the government with pretty important foreign policy consequences. Sanction evasion exposes a totally new situation for Georgia in general, because Georgian government has been trying to become to implement these sanctions in accordance with the regulations and the requirements. However, again, we've seen that there is this asymmetry between the actions and the words, and also we definitely see that some companies have been able to utilize Georgia's liberal business environment against the interests of the country.
Yeah, so Reuters reported that Shelbert was connected to a much wider multi-billion-dollar sanctions evasions network. How extensive could this network be? I know you mentioned it earlier, but how could it also face scrutiny?
Well, some crypto outlets have headlined a 4 billion figure. Now, this figure is not directly connected to the Shelbit company. It is connected to the general activities of the IRGC and also the general attempts of the US Treasury to eliminate sanction evasion. So in total, we're talking about huge amounts of money. Again, 4 billion has been named, that have definite connections to Iranian companies and also to the IRGC.
You mentioned that it was the US that actually clamped down on this company. So with Washington now increasingly targeting crypto exchanges linked to Iran, can sanctions actually stop these financial flows? Or will it be the money will simply move through different platforms and different jurisdictions, maybe not in Georgia, outside of Georgia possibly?
Well, that's a $1 billion question, because I think we're in a race right now. The United States are trying to find all those loopholes that have been used by different actors, not only IRGC, but also the others, while those actors are also trying to find more and new loopholes to be able to ensure that sanctions are evaded. So again, we're in a race. The State Department, together with the Treasury, have been working pretty well so far, and they have been able to dry out flaws to many terrorist organizations around the world. Let's hope that they will be able to continue, because that's absolutely important to not only US, but also to the global security.
All right, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate your insights on A News.
Thank you for the invitation.
Now, NVIDIA has launched new financing platforms aimed at raising more than $500 billion of third-party capital for artificial intelligence infrastructure. The company says it signed memorandums of understanding with 6 other financial major institutions. These are Apollo, BlackRock, Blackstone, Brookfield, Goldman Sachs, and KKR. The move is designed to accelerate the construction of data centers as demand for AI computing capacity continues to grow. The company did not disclose the financial terms or a timetable for deploying the funds. After the break, we'll look at more stories shaping the region. Stay tuned. Welcome back to A News. Now, a new major artificial intelligence factory has opened in Armenia, marking the launch of the first phase of a project that could reshape the region's technology landscape. Developed by US-based AI company Firebird, the 2-phase project is expected to attract $5 billion in total investment, powered by NVIDIA and Dell Technologies. The facility will provide advanced computing capacity for AI development. Firebird plans to deploy more than 70,000 GPUs and build 300 megawatts of AI capacity in Armenia by the end of 2027. Senior officials from Armenia, Kazakhstan, and the United States attended the opening, highlighting the project's wider regional significance. Turkey's parliament has approved a landmark bill aimed at advancing the disarmament of the PKK and the reintegration of former militants into society. Adam Morrow reports from Istanbul.
Turkey's parliament has approved landmark legislation designed to advance the government's peace process with the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK. The bill passed late Monday by 468 votes to 88, with support from President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's ruling AK party, its nationalist ally, the MHP, and the pro-Kurdish Dem party. The legislation creates a legal framework for implementing the PKK's dissolution and disarmament, while offering legal protections and suspended jail terms for many former militants who were not involved in serious crimes. The law, however, will only take effect once Turkish authorities verify that the group has fully disarmed and ended its militant activities. A decision by Turkey's National Security Council confirming the group's dissolution must then be published before the legal provisions can be implemented. The legislation excludes senior PKK figures convicted of serious crimes, including the group's long-jailed leader, Abdullah Öcalan, who will remain behind bars. Early last year, Öcalan issued a public appeal for the PKK to lay down its arms and disband, a call later endorsed by the group's leadership based in northern Iraq. The PKK subsequently staged a symbolic weapons destruction ceremony, paving the way for the latest legislative step. The PKK, designated a terrorist group by Turkey, the United States, and the European Union, has waged an armed insurgency against the Turkish state since 1984. According to government estimates and international agencies, the conflict has claimed more than 40,000 lives, both civilian and military, and spread into both northern Iraq and Syria. Supporters see the new law as a historic opportunity to end one of the region's most intractable conflicts and reintegrate thousands of former militants into society. Critics, however, say broader political and democratic reforms will still be needed if the peace process is to produce a lasting settlement. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Turkey has restored commercial shipping through its strategic straits into the Black Sea after delays raised concerns among operators. The move comes as calls grow for greater protection of civilian vessels and a possible ceasefire in the region.
Turkey has resumed commercial vessels to pass through its straits into the Black Sea, following delays that had raised concerns over maritime traffic in the region. According to Bloomberg, an oil tanker entered the Dardanelles on Sunday after waiting for several days. The vessel was heading to the Caspian Pipeline Consortium terminal in Russia's Novorossiysk. A container ship also received clearance to transit the straits. The move comes amid growing concerns over attacks on civilian shipping in the Black Sea and calls for greater protection of maritime traffic. The president of the Association for Euro-Atlantic Cooperation says Turkey may be seeking to revive its role as a mediator, suggesting that a limited ceasefire in the Black Sea could pave the way for wider negotiations. However, she says neither Russia nor Ukraine currently appears ready for broader compromises. A Russian expert says the issue is primarily political and military, adding that delays to shipping are unlikely to put enough pressure on either side to agree to a ceasefire. The Turkish Straits are a key trade route linking the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. The resumption of traffic follows reports that Turkey had restricted some commercial vessels amid heightened security concerns linked to the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Now, Pakistan's central bank warns a wider Middle East conflict could push energy prices higher and add to economic pressure at home. Mariam Zia reports from Islamabad.
Pakistan is already feeling the economic fallout from the Middle East conflict. In its report released on Monday, the State Bank of Pakistan warned that a prolonged or wider conflict could push global energy and commodity prices above current projections. The conflict, which began in February, has already driven up energy prices. Freight and insurance costs have also risen. Supply chains have been disrupted. For Pakistan, that matters quickly. Higher energy costs can push up inflation. They can also put pressure on the country's external account and the broader macroeconomic outlook. The impact was visible earlier this year. Inflation averaged 10.2% between March and June, after remaining within the 5 to 7% range earlier in the year. The SBP expects economic growth of 3.5 to 4.5% in fiscal year 27. but it warns elevated energy costs and supply disruptions could slow the recovery. For Pakistan, the risk goes beyond higher fuel prices. A deeper Middle East conflict could feed into inflation, weaken the external position, and put the country's economic recovery under renewed pressure. Mariam Zia, A News, Islamabad.
And that's the news for this hour. Thank you for joining me, Tim Tongana, and the team behind the scenes. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest updates. Goodbye.